Hey folks, this is Matt Rainwater. I'm the colorist for Dark Horse Comics Plants vs. Zombies books. I'm going to show y'all a little bit about how I color a comic. And for this video, I'm going to go through the process of flatting. There are a lot of colorists who hire flatters. I've hired flatters before for previous comics that I worked on. I generally like to do flatting on my own though. Largely because it saves costs. I mean, my budget's pretty tight. I can't really afford flatters. But when I can, I do, because it does save me a lot of time. But today I want to show y'all how to do flatting. These are my techniques for flatting. There's no, one technique that beats all techniques. It's all about what works best for you. And this is what works best for me. This is how I get it done fast. Because when you're coloring comics, when you're doing work for periodicals, speed is oftentimes one of the most important things. So let's get started. I'm gonna go, first off, I'm gonna check this page. So this doesn't always happen, but in this case, this is line art by Nitty. I received this line art and I received it in bitmap format. So I have to convert it over into CMYK color. So in order to do that from bitmap, first I have to go to grayscale, keep the size ratio to 1, don't mess with that. And then I'm going to bring it over into CMYK color. Now, there's going to be some extra stuff I'm going to talk about with CMYK color because part of my process for coloring is that I use two different programs. I use Adobe Photoshop and I also use Clip Studio Paint Pro. And I'm going to go more into the reasons why I use both of these programs. Both programs are strong in different ways. I wish that they would just combine all these features into one omnipotent program, but here we are. So I've converted my file over into CMYK, and now I am going to create a new layer, unlock this background layer. All right, and I'm going to pull the line art layer over this second layer. I'm going to name this flats. Now, for those of you watching this video and wondering, okay, so what are flats anyway? Flatting is basically the first step of coloring a comic. And what the purpose of flatting is that you create, let me pull up a sample for you to look at. The purpose of a flat is that you create color shapes to make it easier for you to color your comics. So this is a finished page. This is basically what flats look like. We'll zoom in a little bit to this panel. Basically, it's just all of the shapes that you want to color inside so that it makes your work faster instead of like coloring like you would if you were doing watercolor and you're going with one color at a time and layering over without basically it creates like a safety net. This is kind of the best way that I can think about it, explaining it. It allows you to be able to select whatever colors you want to color within, and then you can, let's see here, let me create a layer, and then you can basically just, you don't have to worry about coloring outside the lines. You're just coloring within this selected space. So if you wanted to say do some shadowing, or you want it to do, one second, you want it to do some kind of gradient effect like this. Let me try that again. you know, like so. So yeah, that's basically like the purpose of flatting and why colorists often hire flatters, and it's all about saving time and making the process more effective for the colorist. So let's go back into this blank page. I say blank page. It's got line art on it. It's good to go. But this black and white page. So the first thing that I do is that I've already got my layer set up. I got my line art layer. I have my flats layer. This flats layer, I'm going to fill up with one generalized color. And the point of doing that is to make sure that there is color trapped underneath all the line art. I'm going to eventually, I'm going to eventually flat this page to where, everything looks like it needs to look. All the gutter space is white. We got Crazy Dave's colors locked in, all that stuff. But we're going to start now with one generalized color. And I usually pick like a color I would just generally wouldn't use. So I'm going to pick like, I like to use this one. I like to use this color because it's a good contrast color. It's kind of like this hot pink. Let's see. I'm just gonna. Sorry about that. All right. I'm just gonna use my fill bucket. Oh, and so the next thing you need to do before you even do that, make sure your line art is set to multiply, and then with the little lock signal, lock your line art, make sure you don't mess with it. And now we're going to fill it. Great. So we now have our page that we're about to get ready to flat. It's set up. And this is something I usually do in Photoshop, and I usually set up as an action so that I can just, hit a button. Usually I set it to F9. I'll go into actions in a different tutorial. But today we'll just stick to the basics. So this is how a page is generally set up for flatting. Let's go over to Clip Studio. 1 second. Here we go. All right. So in Clip Studio, I've already started flatting some new pages. This is line art by Jacob Chabot. Or is it Chabot? I'm not sure. I haven't met this person. This is part of working in comics is sometimes you don't know any of the people that you work with. Not out of anything other than the distance and time, and sometimes you just don't go to the same conventions. But anyway, so I'm gonna make sure everything's ready to go. So I've already got Nate here flat it, and I want to talk with y'all about my process for flatting, which is basically I will fill up my 2 palettes with colors chosen from my palette, and I'll show you. This is this is the page that I use to reference all of the major characters in Plants vs. Zombies. I also have a page like this for the zombies, but this is like for all the plants. I got the pea shooter, sunflower, cherry bombs, what is it called? Potato mine, the spud mine. I can't remember. There's so many characters in this comic. Sunflower. Oh, this is the sun shroom. There's the sunflower. Chomper. Anyway, yeah. And then I also use reference from the internet and just eyeball a lot of the colors. I've done this for so long now that it's gotten to the point where I can just eyeball most of the colors. But generally, it's good to have a palette so that you stay consistent within, the framework that you're working in. So now I'm going to work on Patrice, and I'm going to select her hair color. I'm going to select a part of her shirt color. I mean, her shirt is only composed of 2 different colors, this white and then this blue that I've already selected. So before I get started flatting, let me go into why I use Clip Studio Paint Pro for the majority of my flatting. The main reason is this fill bucket. It's the best. If you're working with line art that's very closed line art, like with Jacob's line art, it's really great working with him because he has. I mean, most of the artists that I've worked with on this comic have a kind of a closed line art style. Ron Chan does, Tim does, Jacob does. They all pretty much work with kind of a cartoony closed line art style, so it makes it pretty easy to flat generally. And that's where this paint bucket excels in Clip Studio. And the way it works is that basically, I mean, I don't entirely know how it works, but there's some sort of algorithm that allows it to see, you know, the edges of line art that it basically traces out, and so it automatically creates those shapes for you with the press of the fill bucket tool, like so. In order to make this work, of course, since we have two separated layers, right? We have our line art layer and our flats layer. You have to first, I'm unselecting it, but you go to your line art layer, and then you see this little zipper icon. You want to make sure it's set to the refer edited layer only. So you see right here, and you click on that. It's selected, and then you go select your flats layer, or even lock your line art layer before you do anything else. And then you go to your flats layer, and you're ready to go. And then you just go find what you need to flat. So this is my main method. Is I go and I select all of. So in this situation, I selected the orange for Patrice's hair. So I'm just gonna open all the pages that I'm currently working on, and I'm gonna select all the pages that Patrice shows up in, and I'm just gonna fill in all of her hair, which in these first 12 pages that I'm working on, she doesn't actually show up too often, just in this first page. And I've already filled in her shirt, so let's move on to a pea shooter. We're gonna fill in a pea shooter. Pea shooters are very easy to flat because they're only composed of two colors, a yellowish green and a slightly darker bluer green. For the leaf, like so. And you know, I just do this for hours and hours on end. This is actually, I think, in terms of overall time spent when coloring a comic, this is probably the majority of the time spent is doing flatting, which once again is one of the main reasons why flatters or why colorists will hire flatters, is because this is the brunt of the work. Unfortunately, a lot of times flatters are not paid enough for the work that they do, I feel like, because it's pretty like crucial work. Without flatters, there's so many deadlines that would not be met by colorists. Of course, I'm not going to say that it's the fault of colorists necessarily that underpay flatters. Colorists themselves are underpaid. So it's pressure put on a lot of the time by companies that do not pay their artists enough. And all I can say is that colorists, if you are making a decent amount of money from your books that you're working on, make sure you pay your flatters a fair rate. What is a fair rate? I would argue that a fair rate at least starts at $30 a page, but I think you can go. I think there are a lot of colors who could easily go higher than that. So I'm just gonna fill in some more pea shooters. And so this is just what I do for hours. Like, if you're going to be doing this work, make sure that you have some good entertainment on, either an audiobook or you're streaming some episodes of one of your favorite shows you want to binge watch, or you got a bunch of podcasts lined up. Something I'm not doing that I typically try and do when I'm fighting like this is, after finishing all the elements of the page that I needed to fill up, I need to make sure that I save. Please save often. As often as you can. Also, this is the screen. I actually need to be doing this to save even more time for myself. This is a green that I use pretty generally for a lot of the green elements on plants. It's a way, I do this as a way to make the colors more cohesive. And also, I mean, they're all plants. They all share. They all should share some sort of commonality together, I feel like. So I'm gonna save. Let's move on to the sunflower. After this is done saving. Okay, gonna select the brown for the interior of the flower. And we're gonna go in here, zoom in. I'm using a tablet, I'm using a Cintiq companion right now, so zooming in, I'm just doing with my fingers. I really love it. It's one of my favorite things about using a Cintiq is that I don't have to go select a tool to zoom in. I can just do it with my hands. That alone saves a fair amount of time for myself. Although, you know, I can also just use a keyboard and do Control plus and Control minus, right? But it just feels, I don't know, it has a certain futuristic feeling that I enjoy. It allows me to feel very connected with my equipment. And that is, I wish there were more ways that that was utilized with our art technology. Welcome, if you're listening out there, or anybody really, Microsoft, figure out ways to make your devices more effective, to feel connected, to feel, you know, to orient towards touch. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do too, after I've, so another part of my process is that I will start with characters first and then work my way towards the background. And the closer that I get towards having all the characters flatted in, the more I get towards starting to focus on individual pages at a time. But at this stage, it's best to work like going page to page, just focusing on those characters that I want to fill up. It's odd, but it really does save a lot of time for flatting. And this is such a tedious part of the process. You really want to do it as fast as you can. All right. Let's find some tall nuts, and then we'll be done with this tutorial. Oh, there's a little tall nut back there. There's the back of a tall nut right here. And in that next tutorial where I go a little further in about flatting, I will talk about some color theory and how I'm making some of my color choices for backgrounds, because that is one of the that's one of the parts when coloring Plants vs. Zombies where I start to have to make my own choices in terms of what kind of colors I'm going to use. Basically, like all these colors that I'm using are pretty much predetermined by PopCap, but also by Ron Chan, who created a lot of these characters like Nate, Patrice, Mr. Stubbins, and a couple of other characters. So, when flatting, it's good to pay attention to what those pre-established palettes are, because those are, otherwise the editor's going to point it out, right? So anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I'm going to get back to y'all later once I've finished flatting more of these pages, and I will show you my progress, and you'll get a better idea about this part of coloring. Thanks again. Talk to y'all later. Bye. Okay, bye.